This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial.
Hey, everybody. Welcome into a special episode of the Can We Please Talk podcast. As always, I'm Mike Leon.
And I'm Nick Severi.
On the program today, there can be only one thing that we can talk about. The former 45th president of the United States, Donald John Trump, was found guilty in a Manhattan court on all 34 counts of falsifying business records to influence the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. Nick and I are going to examine every single aspect of this, listen to reaction across the television circuit from some lawyers that we have had on this very program talking about this case and more. Nick, normally we exchange the pleasantries. This is a little emergency pod here. I'm out in Orlando recording some stuff for Leon Media Network and the Box Lab Promotions fight that's coming up. This came down around, I want to say around 5 p.m. Eastern time. On Thursday afternoon, evening. I've been texting with, and if you haven't heard our previous episode with Jimena Bustillo, Jimena, obviously a fantastic NPR reporter. She's been covering the trial. She's been one of NPR's embedded reporters in the courtroom. She's been covering all this. We were texting back and forth when she got out afterwards. It's just, a lot of wow. Can't believe they came back this fast. And it's true because if you think about it, I thought the jury would be deliberating for a while, just because they came back with some notes and questions for the judge. We had a couple of days of it. And then all of a sudden around 4:59, 5 o'clock, we get the announcement like this.
We are getting word on the first count that Donald Trump is guilty. Now, remember, there are 34 counts that we will go through. Count 2. Guilty. Count 3, guilty. Count 4, guilty. Count 5 and 6, guilty. Count 7, guilty. Count 8, guilty. Count 9, guilty. Count 10, guilty. Count 11, guilty. Count 12, guilty. Count 13, guilty. Count 14 and 15, guilty. Count 16, guilty. Remember, this is a unanimous decision by the jury on each of these counts. Count 17, guilty. Count 18, guilty. Count 19, guilty. Count 20, guilty. Count 21, guilty. Count 22, guilty. Count 23, guilty. Count 24, guilty. Count 25, guilty. Count 26, guilty. Count 27, guilty. Count 28, guilty. 29, guilty. Count 30, guilty. Count 31, guilty. Count 32, guilty. Count 33, guilty. Count 34, guilty.
So that was CBS News covering the trial earlier today. First time a former or sitting United States president of the U.S. president, I should say, has been convicted of criminal charges. Again, 34 counts, falsifying business records. The jury, 12-panel jury, unanimously agreed that Trump falsified business records to conceal $130,000 hush money payment to adult film star and Nick's favorite person, Stephanie Clifford, not calling her Stormy Daniels. By the way, funny enough, Nick, I don't know if you heard this, but apparently, according to her testimony, Jimena said in the last episode, she wanted to be known as Stormy Daniels, not as Stephanie Clifford. So your mistake on that. Okay, before we get into some of the jokingness of this, because you and I have had a bet for a while about whether or not Trump would actually go to jail for any of this. You're getting closer on cashing in on a steak from a nice steakhouse. What did you make of this coming down? This is unprecedented. It felt very OJ in terms of where I know I will be from now on when I heard the verdict come in. However, the difference is this trial was not televised. Our buddy Jake Tapper on CNN made a joke that New York lives in the 1930s and think they don't have television cameras. And God forbid they would stream this thing or showcase in court this trial, because this is the only one that's happening. We should have transparency and see this play out in front of us. We didn't see any of that. We heard some of the testimony. We didn't get to see any of it. Court renderings. We know of the 20 or so witnesses that the prosecution called. The defense only called 2 witnesses, and neither of those were named Donald John Trump to the stand. What do you make of the verdict overall and where we are right now?
I mean, I think the decision not to televise, I don't know if it's partly because of all the gag orders that were constantly violated. The former president made an effort constantly, and we even saw this with his remarks leaving the courtroom, that he was going to make this about everything except the trial itself. His comments outside the courtroom were, "This is rigged." I think I heard earlier, something about like the whole country is rigged right now. Soros-backed DA. That's all coded language right there. So it was always everything but the trial itself. It's funny. I think Mehdi Hassan or someone tweeted about the challenge of trying to explain this to your kids, and I did a decent job with my older child. I didn't have to get into the details of what Trump and and Miss Daniels apparently were doing. Suffice to say, then he was being unfaithful to his wife, is how I kind of explained it. But I don't know if it's necessarily an open and shut case, but as those 34 counts were all being decided upon by the members of the jury, and you just mentioned a moment ago, only 2 witnesses on the side of the defense, it makes me wonder a little bit if the defense did not take this case as seriously. I feel like on our show at some point, I don't know, Mike, if you had said this or if we've had someone on that talked about this, about whether of the 4 major cases against the former president, if this one was the one that folks felt carried the least amount of water in terms of the viability of the case. And I don't know if that meant the defense didn't take it as seriously. The prosecution came ready. We've all talked about Letitia James. We've talked about potential politicization of this case, but credit goes to Alvin Bragg and his team. They articulated a really good case and they were able to play it out accordingly. I roll my eyes a little bit at some of the comments I've seen on social media. I've seen the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, talk negatively about the verdict. Susan Collins, Senator of Maine, has done the same thing, and it just kind of, it's basically what side of the political fence you want to be on. Obviously, Marjorie Taylor Greene, not a big fan of this decision. And what's silly to me is the party that likes to be about allegedly small government. These federal folks seem to have a lot of opinion about what happens in the state of New York. Like, where is this conservative ethos of what happens in New York stays in New York, right? Like, why have federal voices talk about this? It especially, I find, really distasteful when the Speaker of the House, the number 3 person in line of the presidency, is so vocal about being supportive of the presumptive nominee. Like, he's not been named officially yet. That's going to come a few days after the July 11th sentencing. Do your job, dude. Forget this. Like, what are you doing? Like, let the system play itself out. There's a guilty verdict in, and I found that part of it a little bit distasteful. But 34th for 34. I was trying to figure out who's had a better shooting percentage historically in the NBA, and I've yet to see it at that cut. But just a really stunning day in terms of court decisions.
Well, I wanted to stay on something you just mentioned before, because Caitlin Collins over at CNN, she had on Trump's attorney, Todd Blanche, excuse me. So this guy, Todd Blanche, if you don't know him, it's okay. But if you do, have you been following some of the stuff with the former president? Todd is overseeing a couple of the cases. So he's the lead attorney for the New York case specifically. You may recognize his face because whenever Trump has been out on the steps, or at least outside of the courtroom itself, he's always done some media The guy standing next to him is Todd Blanche. Caitlin Collins on CNN asked him, why didn't you call more witnesses? Why didn't you bring Trump to the stand? Take a listen, and we'll react on the other side, Nick, to what Blanche said when Caitlin Collins asked him about why no Trump.
One thing he brought up were the witnesses who were not called. And he was saying that there could have been witnesses that would have helped make the case. We never saw Keith Schiller, Alan Weisselberg, some key figures here who got brought up a lot. Why didn't the defense call any of these witnesses?
Well, because we happen to live in America and we don't have the burden of proof. And so there's not... That's not the point. That's a question that is a loaded question that should not be asked of a defense attorney or a defendant. The question that we asked the jury, and they ultimately obviously got passed, is why the prosecution didn't call those witnesses, right? You, as a defense attorney, you don't go into a case saying, I'm going to fill the holes of the prosecution, right? And Keith Schiller and some of the other witnesses that were not ultimately called, in our view, should have been called by the prosecution, and we asked the jury to take a hard look at that. I don't know whether they did or not, but they convicted.
Okay, listen. If you listen to this show often, you would know how Nick and I feel about the former president. If you also listen to this show, you would know that we've been very fair about this specific case, not the other ones, because the other ones involve what we consider and what experts that we've brought on the show consider to be serious crimes. Classifying documents are top national secrets, right? And then obviously not allowing the peaceful transfer of power on January 6th. Those are things that are documented. There's footage of. Those things are on tape, FBI raids, if we want to call them raids, whatever you want to call them. It doesn't matter. So you know that Nick and I, how we felt about this case, just from the legal standpoint of it. If that guy was my defense attorney, Nick, yeah, I'm punting because we're probably not going to win the game and we need to play field position. And if you get that reference, kudos to you for watching NFL or college football. But that argument of, no, I think we're good here. We don't have to prove anything, even though they fired 22 shots. We're only going to shoot 2 shots back. And the 2 shots we're going to shoot are blanks. They're not actual bullets, Nick. Like Caitlin asked, why no Alan Weisselberg? Why no former president? What do you make of, I know we're kind of like, this is weird because this has never happened. And it's never happened. It's unprecedented. Former president of the United States, presumptive nominee, running again for president. We have an election in 6 months. He's now been found guilty. Sentencing will happen on July 11th. By the way, July 11th, Free and Equal Elections Foundation will be having our debate with the third-party candidates. So thanks for stealing our spotlight, New York, in terms of doing all that. What do you make of his defense attorney? This guy's leading 2 cases for him, saying right there, A, we live in America. Thanks. I didn't know that. B, yeah, we didn't need to prove anything because we knew what we were doing. And before you go, Nick, before you go, let me throw you up a little lob pass. I'll be Chris Paul. You could be Blake Griffin. This is Nima Rahmani, former federal prosecutor, that he came on this show. Came on this show. He's a TV contributor. He was on Fox News' breaking coverage. And he said this about the defense not calling Trump to the stand. So take a listen to this.
If Trump had taken the stand and said that, yeah, I did it, but I did it to protect Melania from embarrassment. And you heard Hope Hicks tell you that I gathered the newspapers so she wouldn't read about the details of this affair. That may have resonated with some jurors. Ultimately, it was too little, too late for the defense. I think Trump wanted to take the stand. I think his attorneys discouraged them to do so. And I think it was a mistake in this case.
So what says Mr. Savary? There's a former federal prosecutor that, again, in LA, and he says, yeah, Trump could have maybe swayed some jurors because the case wasn't that strong, according to him. What do you make of it all about not only what Trump's attorney said, but what Nima said there in that clip?
Yeah, I go back to what I said earlier. I think his defense attorney took this too lightly. That's a ridiculous response to give to someone about why did you only bring, 2 bullets when the other team brought 22. That's asinine. I'm not a fan, obviously, of the former president, but I will give him this. He's a fighter. Like that is a dogged competitor. We saw this with him winning the nomination. We saw it even this time around when he basically had a clean sweep of all these primaries. This is a person who plays to win. His defense attorney did not. If anything matters to the former president, it's his name. He's a little like Marlo Stanfield that way, for those of you who are Wire fans. And his defense attorney did him no favors. I was stunned by the response to Caitlin's question, but also, yeah, I'm gonna give myself a victory lap on this one. I really think the defense really thought that they had this covered. They didn't have to try that much. I don't know if Trump buys himself anything else being on the stand. I mean, he couldn't even respect a gag order, and to the tune of I think several violations. So I don't know what that buys him being on the stand, but anything is better than what the defense's efforts were for this case.
Nick, quick break from the pod because this episode is presented by our friends over at SeatGeek. Your next best night ever is waiting, my friend, and they've got the tickets. You want to go to an NBA game, an NFL game, a concert, Major League Baseball, whatever it is, all you got to do is go to SeatGeek.com. You're going to enter in the promo code Can We Please Talk, and you're going to get $20 off that purchase right now at SeatGeek. Nick, what are you going to do with your $20 off on those tickets, buddy?
I mean, that saves me on anything. I can get food at the game. I can just get the tickets themselves. I mean, baseball's coming along, so I'm excited for that. I can get upper deck tickets and just nothing. And then just all I got to do is worry about food. I mean, anywhere I want to use this, it's well worth it. $20 is a worthwhile investment.
That's right. And I've seen you at sporting events. You eat a lot. Nick needs those $20 off. So go to SeatGeek.com right now. Enter in the promo code Can We Please Talk. You're going to get $20 off that purchase. Nick, today's episode is presented as always by our friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Since 2009, their passion has always been bringing you gourmet coffees from all over the world, roasted fresh to order. I got my coffee snob here, Nick Severi. Nick, tell these people, coffee snob it up here. Tell these people why Fresh Roasted Coffee is so good and why they're the official sponsor of Can We Please Talk.
Often the best cup of coffee that you're ever going to have is the one you can make from home. And you need good quality coffee to do that. And that's what Fresh Roasted Coffee offers. Between single origin, between blends, flavors, anything on the coffee spectrum they've got. But more importantly, and I can't stress this enough, often when you purchase coffee, you don't know where to start. I mean, there's so many different varieties, so many different opportunities, so many different things you could choose from. And Fresh Roasted Coffee just gives you a very simple questionnaire and just says, hey, figure out what your coffee cup is. Figure out what blend works for you. I've gotten some single origin recommendations, so has Mike, and that's influenced everything. And what they recommend, you can get in a Keurig cup, the way Mike takes it. You can take it in the way I do it, which is typically through a French press, or you can get it for a percolator. Whatever coffee machine you've got, they've got you covered. But more importantly, just a huge variety and a way to learn more about coffee itself.
And all of this is available at freshroastedcoffee.com on their site. 1 cup is all it takes to fall in love with Fresh Roasted Coffee, but you get a discount for being a listener of Can We Please Talk. Enter in the promo code Can We Please Get 20 to get 20% off your first purchase. Head to freshroastedcoffee.com today. All right, so like we mentioned, historic day, verdict was read, Trump remained silent. I want to encourage people to go read Jimena Bustillo's article that she did over on npr.org. It says former President Trump is found guilty in a historic New York criminal case. Like I mentioned, she's been embedded in this trial as one of the NPR reporters there. She's been doing great reporting about this. Judge Merchant, to set the stage, sentencing is happening July 11th. That's a Thursday, 4 days before the start of the Republican National Convention, which is going to be happening in Milwaukee. And then obviously in August will be the DNC convention, which will be happening in Chicago. So it's going to be pretty crazy for a Thursday. He's going to know his fate in terms of whether or not he's going to be, serving jail time, what this sentence looks like. The jury heard from 22 witnesses, 4 weeks of testimony. Again, like I mentioned, 20 witnesses on the prosecution side, only 2 on the defense side. Found guilty, all 34 counts. We're shocked by it, and nothing's shocking. In this Trump era, would anything shock you? A guy coming down an escalator who you thought had no chance of winning the presidency, a former reality star, now he's going to prison for what we think is the lightest of the charges. Does that shock anybody? No, we're all laughing at it, but it doesn't shock anybody. So let's turn to something that I think is pretty interesting, Nick, that came out recently in terms of voter sentiment around this. And this was around whether or not the former president, if he was found guilty in this poll, okay, guilty or not guilty, Trump verdict, will it sway your vote? This poll showed that most people won't be swayed by it. So as the jury was deliberating, this poll obviously took place. I want to say it happened, it says here, a few weeks prior. This was a PBS NewsHour, NPR Marist poll. 2 in 3 registered U.S. voters said a guilty verdict would have no effect on whom they plan to vote for in the presidential election. 67% of the voters said a conviction would make no difference in November, including in that poll, Nick, 74% of independents. So that's a significantly higher number, obviously, the percentage-wise, as opposed to Republicans or Democrats who wouldn't change their vote. And one other note that they put in here from the poll, again, you can go check it out at pbs.org. 25% of Republicans in that poll said they would be even more likely to vote for Trump if he were found guilty by a jury. 27% of Democrats said they would be less likely to vote for him. So that's a normal, we should read nothing from that because that's normal, especially given what we've seen come back data-wise from the primaries and caucuses that have happened, how he won the nomination, how Nikki Haley said she wouldn't vote for him and he's terrible and we're going to lose again, and then all of a sudden she backs him in recent weeks with her comments. So those numbers shouldn't be shocking. But from that poll, Nick, 2 in 3 registered voters say guilty verdict, no effect, 74% of independents. That's the number everyone's going to be watching. What do you make now that we have a verdict, a guilty verdict? And by the way, I've been getting text messages from everybody. Stop texting me. If you don't know, yes, you can run for office while you're in jail, while you're found guilty. Yes, we've never seen anybody do it, but yes, you can do it. Because normally when that happens, the person drops out like a normal human being. They're like, hey, I'm going to be tied up. I'm going to be in jail. So we're going to go ahead and just drop out. We're in uncharted territory here. So before you keep texting me, I've gotten like literally 10 text messages today. Wait, he can't run. Yes, he can run. I defer you to other episodes we've done with legal analysts. So he can run. What do you make of the polling now as we head into a pivotal, by the way, June 27th, CNN, Trump, Biden. We're going to be talking about Biden's handling of what's happening with the war in Gaza. We saw the recent attack by Israel in Rafah after clearing out Rafah and now doing an attack there where 45 people lost their lives. We saw, the botched Afghanistan withdrawal. Obviously, we are recovering economically. And now that's for Trump against Biden. Trump's going to probably use a lot of this court stuff, as you heard in the beginning of the episode, saying that it's all rigged. It's all a conspiracy to get him. Biden now, strategy-wise, it's going to be interesting to see. I'm talking to a convicted felon, Nick. And he's the opposite candidate. I'm talking to a convicted felon. What do you make of, the poll, and now as we start to head into pivotal months, because this is the only trial that's going to happen this year. We know that because of the delays in the other case, specifically in Georgia and with the documents case and Judge Eileen Cannon moving that. And we have no movement yet because the Supreme Court's still listening to the immunity case with respect to the DC trial. So we're not going to get anything else. Now, here comes, we just had our Super Bowl, technically in the politics world. Now we're going to have the debates, the conventions, and then another debate. What do you make of the poll? What do you make of it overall?
Yeah, I would be really surprised to run into someone that says, in light of today's decision, by the jury, I've been swayed to go the other direction. Like this case does nothing to that end. Um, as far as a debate goes, this is a person with no shame. So I feel like I should say it with the southern accent of Paul Giamatti in Private Parts, but so he'll just come out on stage and say, well, it was a rigged decision. Like, I mean, you someone who is that belligerent, who is that stubborn, the only way you can win that is to humiliate him. So hopefully Biden's team is writing up some prison jokes at this point, or maybe Biden comes out with like a striped jacket or an orange jacket to maybe give Donald or something. Like you've got to have fun with this, because Trump is just going to look past this. I'm doing the John Cena can't see you can't see me thing as I say this, but so that's not going to phase him. It's not going to phase the voters either. But it's funny the things you brought up about Biden though, because in light of this decision today, it doesn't mean anything in terms of the U.S.'s response to Gaza. That sits at Biden's feet. It doesn't say anything about an economy that economists will tell you is doing better, but to the average American continues to feel that inflation is still a problem. So all these things are still there. So the Democrats will take a victory lap today, and they could maybe even get some jokes off on June 27th, but you're going to have to hit this man hard. I give Biden credit. I think he's done really well in debates against the former president, but this is not going you may get a punchline or two off, but I'm not quite sure what exactly the Democrats get to use as leverage, because it's not like you're winning any other person from this. Again, I don't think anyone looked at this and said that this is going to sway me. You could have the other three cases happen this year, and you're going to run into the exact same situation. People are in their camps. That's it. The question is, of course, those who look at an RFK Jr. or those who look at Gary Johnson again, or actually, no, sorry, Johnson, I'm running at this point.
Jill Stein, you mean?
Thank
Cornel
you.
West,
Yes, Jill Stein or libertarians or Cornel West. Like, can you shake up anything with them? And a lot of what's helping to push people in those directions is actually in many ways rooted to our reaction, or how we're addressing the situation in Gaza, whether you are in support of it or against it. That has also been a very polarizing decision that Americans are taking right now. It's forcing people to go into their respective camps. So funny enough, not even funny, I think the reality is that Gaza, I think, is playing a larger role in Biden's support than any case that the former president's going to have.
This is all going to be really interesting to watch play out, man, because like I said, for people that don't know the calendar right now coming up, you got obviously the next 3 weeks or so, 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks, depending upon what the former president does from a campaign style perspective. Maybe you'll get some talking points out of that. Obviously, he can take that now with him on the campaign trail, talk all about it. I haven't seen the Biden President Biden going out there and really doing too much campaign stops right now. He's done some other pressers or some things at the White House. So it'll be interesting to see if he ramps any of that up, gives any speeches, mentions, the former president going to jail for this. So that'll be interesting to watch. And then obviously I mentioned June 27th on CNN. That's a Thursday night as well. The first presidential debate. That's going to be interesting just to see, the two of them on stage, no crowd, Dana Bash, Jake Tapper moderating, questions, the back and forth. There's going to be microphones that are allowed to be muted by the moderators themselves, or maybe the network that's controlling it. I'm actually not sure. So that's going to be interesting. Then July 11th is sentencing, Nick. Then we have, the convention, the RNC. You and I potentially may be at doing something around there. August, you're going to have the Democratic convention. Again, you and I potentially doing something around there. And then the second and potentially final debate will be September on ABC News. That'll be September 10th, I believe. So we've got all of these events coming up, and we finally, we're here, Nick. We're actually here. This whole time we were like, will we get a trial of any of these? Well, we did. The worst one. Again, was it the worst one? I don't know. Trump is right. He lost Manhattan by a lot. Yeah, you're not like there, sir. It's not that hard. I mean, this is a math thing, right? Like he lost by like 70 plus percentage points, right? Same thing with the rally in the Bronx. And I kept getting asked about it. I'm like, I don't get why he's here, except then I think about it. There's a voter makeup here, right? Also, he can't go anywhere because he's on trial. So he doesn't want to leave New York and go too far away. Okay, where can I go see blacks and Latinos? Oh, I know. Mike's old hood in the Bronx. I get that. This is interesting, though. Like, to me, you can tell you and I, this is kind of off the cuff. This is why it's a special episode, because I was not expecting the jury to come back with anything, at least for a week, at least. That's A. B, again, the expectations, and Jimena kind of laid it out in the last episode, Nick, was something that was on the minds of reporters, at least, was a hung jury. Because if the jury's coming back and then says, hey, we haven't come to anything, go back in there. Another week goes by. We haven't come to anything, go back in there. And then all of a sudden it becomes a hung jury and we got to do this all over again. And then the trial actually doesn't happen in 2024. But now we're actually here. Like, now we have a guilty verdict. So I open the question to those of you out there. You listen to this show regularly, email us, canwepleasetalkpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us, obviously, on social media, but you can DM us. You can comment on one of the videos. You can send us, a message on Twitter, whatever it is. We want to hear from you. So we'll play it in the next episode, but I want to hear how people are actually feeling about this. I don't mean to text me or Nick if you actually listen to the show. Email us, please. canwepleasetalkpodcast@gmail.com. I'm interested to hear, voter makeup. Does this affect you? Kind of to Nick's point right there. We see the numbers are saying, yeah, it's not really going to affect 2 out of 3 Americans. Okay. Are you in that group? Are you in another group where now you're definitely going to vote for the former president or for current President Biden, given what just played out? I can't vote for a felon, right? So I'm going to vote for the other guy. There may be people in that camp, but either way, let us know what you think. In the coming weeks, we're going to be devoting a little bit more to not only this trial, but now looking at it holistically, because sentencing is going to be happening July 11th. And we've had legal analysts on the show, Nick, that have told us that given his age, given no prior criminal history, we don't actually expect him to serve any jail time. Not only that, he's a former president of the United States. He has a Secret Service with him. How will that work with, a former president actually in jail? Does he take over an entire wing of the jail because you can't have people around him? Like, we don't know how any of that's going to be. So we're going to talk to legal analysts and kind of break this all down. My thank yous, as always, to my co-host, Nick Saveri, for this special episode of the Can We Please Talk podcast. We are just as shocked as you all are out there about this. But like I said, email us. Want to get something off your chest? Tell us a little bit more about how you feel about this verdict. As always, thank you for listening to our shows. You can check out the video portions of our interviews over on our YouTube channel, audio podcast platforms. You know by now, Apple, Spotify, Google. Shout out to everybody who listens to us on Good Pods. Shout out to Acast, our hosting platform. We can't do it without them. And we can't do it without each and every one of you that listens to this program. As always, I'm Mike Leon.
And I'm Nick Saveri.
We'll see everybody next time.